September 7, 2010, a Chinese trawler barrels straight into two Japanese Coast Guard cutters near the Senkaku Islands. An act caught on camera but almost suppressed. What made Japan abandon restraint and storm the trawler at sea, risking an international crisis? The leaked footage reveals why this clash sent shockwaves far beyond disputed waters. The footage that ignited the Senkaku crisis first appeared online late at night on November 4th, 2010. 6 video segments totaling 44 minutes surfaced on YouTube under the alias Sengoku 38. Each clip bore the unmistakable timestamp and camera angle of Japanese Coast Guard bridge recorders, digital files originally locked behind government security protocols. The uploader moved fast. After an unsuccessful attempt to hand the material to a major news network, the leaker bypassed official channels and chose direct release to the public. Within hours, the video spread across forums in Japan and overseas, copied and re-uploaded before platform moderators could react. Forensic reviewers and journalists pored over the files, searching for signs of tampering. No evidence of splicing, editing, or audio manipulation surfaced. The footage matched the events logged in official Coast Guard statements, down to the hull numbers, warning sirens, and radio calls caught on tape. Vessel markings, sea conditions, and the sequence of collisions all lined up with documented incident reports. The metadata, though partially stripped by the upload process, still reflected the original recording dates from September 7th, 2010. Japanese authorities confirmed the authenticity of the leak, but withheld full, unedited archives. Lawmakers had only seen a short, carefully edited excerpt in a closed-door screening days earlier. The online videos, however, ran much longer and captured the real-time escalation at sea. As the clips ricocheted across global media, the visual record became impossible to suppress. Every frame would soon become evidence, not just of what happened, but of how the world learned about it. The Senkaku Islands, known as Diaoyu in China, sit in waters rich with fish and suspected oil reserves, drawing the attention of 3 competing governments. The value of these resources is more than economic. Control here means influence over shipping lanes and strategic leverage in the East China Sea. For decades, Japanese administration of the islands went largely unchallenged. That changed in September 2012 when the Japanese government purchased the islands from their private owner, a move intended to keep them out of the hands of nationalist groups. Instead, the sale triggered a surge in Chinese government patrols and sparked the largest protests against Japan and China in years. Since that nationalization, the waters around the Senkakus have become a stage for near-constant maritime standoffs. Chinese government vessels now patrol the contiguous zone almost every day. In 2024, Chinese ships were recorded in the area 355 days out of the year, a record high, up from 352 days in 2023. The number of Chinese government vessels entering the contiguous zone reached 1,351 in 2024 alone. Direct intrusions into Japanese claimed territorial waters also remain frequent, with 42 days logged last year. Patrols that once occurred sporadically have become routine, and the presence of large, heavily armed cutters on both sides has turned the area into one of the world's most closely monitored maritime flashpoints. Japan has responded with its own surge. The Ishigaki Coast Guard office now fields rapid response cutters and maintains a force of around 600 personnel dedicated to Senkaku patrols. The escalation has transformed the islands from a legal dispute into a daily contest of will, where every patrol, every maneuver carries the risk of miscalculation. At 10:15 in the morning on September 7, 2010, the bridge crew aboard the Japan Coast Guard cutter Yonaguni spotted the Minjinyu 5179 trawler inside Japan claimed territorial waters about 12 kilometers northwest of Kuba Island. The Yonaguni's radio operator hailed the Chinese vessel, issuing clear orders in both Japanese and English: stop fishing, leave the area, and prepare for inspection. The warnings were repeated over loudspeakers and VHF radio, but the trawler's captain, John Kishiong, ignored every call. Instead, the Minjinyu 5179 adjusted course, engines revving as it tried to break past the Coast Guard ship. On the Yonaguni's bridge, officers tracked the trawler's erratic movement on radar and through binoculars. The warning siren blared. At 10:16 in the morning, the Minjinyu 5179 veered sharply and rammed Yonaguni's stern. The impact sent a jolt through the cutter, but caused only minor structural damage. Crew members steadied themselves, bracing for what would come next. The trawler did not stop. Instead, it accelerated, setting off a chase that would draw in additional patrol ships and push the standoff from tense warnings into direct confrontation. At 10:56 in the morning, the Minjinyu 5179 struck a second Japanese Coast Guard ship, the Mizuki, in open water northwest of Kuba Island. The impact jolted the patrol vessel but failed to break the containment. Within seconds, a third cutter closed from the east, tightening the perimeter. The trawler's engines roared as Captain John Chishiong tried to force his way through, but the coordinated maneuver left no escape route. Japanese officers trained for high-risk boardings launched a rapid approach. Two small boats swept alongside the trawler's hull. Boarding teams in body armor climbed over the rails, securing the deck and moving quickly to the wheelhouse. John was ordered to cut his engines and surrender. 14 crew members were detained without reported resistance, while officers placed John in handcuffs and began a search of the vessel. The Coast Guard established control within minutes, then rigged tow lines to the Minjinyu 5179. With the trawler under escort, the entire group set course for Ishigaki port, leaving the disputed waters behind as radio traffic crackled with news of the arrest. Instrument data from the incident offers a rare window into the calculus behind each maneuver. Radar traces from the Japan Coast Guard cutter show the Minjinyu 5179 altering course sharply, not once but twice, at angles that align with the collision points recorded on video. Automatic identification system logs, though incomplete for the trawler, confirm the relative positions and speeds of the Yonaguni and Mizuki. Overlaying these tracks, a retired Coast Guard officer describes the incident as a textbook case of deliberate contact. The trawler's engine output spikes seconds before each impact, suggesting intentional acceleration rather than evasive action. Collision modeling using vessel blueprints and known handling characteristics supports this reading. Simulations run by marine engineers indicate that the Minjinyu's turns toward the cutters required decisive helm input, not a loss of control. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard's own after-action report details how updated boarding protocols instituted after prior close calls guided the boxing in maneuver, minimizing risk to both crews. Instrument logs and procedural records examined together leave little doubt about the trawler's intent, yet the data also highlight the razor-thin margin for error at sea, where a single wrong move can escalate a standoff into an international flashpoint. Legal boundaries in the East China Sea are anything but clear. Under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS Article 17 allows for innocent passage through territorial waters. But Article 73 gives coastal states the right to board, inspect, and arrest vessels fishing illegally in those same waters. Japan claims the waters around the Senkaku Islands as its own territorial sea, citing effective administrative control and international law. China, however, rejects both the claim and the arrest, arguing that the islands and the waters surrounding them are Chinese territory by history and usage. A maritime law scholar points out that both sides use untielos to justify their actions, but neither interpretation is universally recognized. In this legal gray zone, every boarding or arrest becomes a test of sovereignty, not just a question of maritime law. China's foreign ministry delivered its protest at an hour when most embassies stood quiet. Just after midnight, the Japanese ambassador in Beijing was summoned by senior officials and pressed for the immediate release of the detained captain. The calls grew louder as the hours passed. There were 6 official summonses in total, each more urgent than the last. Meanwhile, Chinese maritime authorities dispatched a fisheries law enforcement vessel to the Senkaku waters within hours of the arrest. Patrols multiplied quickly. By the end of the first week, up to 30 Chinese and Taiwanese ships had entered the disputed zone, with hundreds more reported just outside the 12 nautical mile line. Japan's Coast Guard responded with a surge of its own, sending rapid response cutters to reinforce the area. Security partners in Washington and Taipei issued statements of concern, warning that the standoff risked spiraling beyond control. Today, Chinese and Japanese ships still shadow each other near the Senkaku Islands nearly every week. As maritime boundaries blur and rivals test resolve, escalation remains a risk. In these disputed waters, every collision echoes, reminding us how quickly a standoff can reshape the region.